If you've ever taken an algebra class and you've covered quadratics, then you've probably heard the song. I know you've seen the quadratic formula, but we all should know it. But it's x is equal to negative b, or the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And most students just think it was made up. It was invented by someone to make their life harder in a math class, when actually it was the opposite. It was meant to make their life easier by coming up with a formula that can solve for any quadratic when you're looking for the zeros. And so it comes from the standard form of a quadratic, which is ax squared plus bx plus c, when we want to know the value of x that makes it 0. So then we get this by completing the square on standard form. So completing the square, if we start with the first step, we want to factor out an a value. So if we take a out of x squared, we get x squared plus, and then it's going to be b over a times x plus c. So we just took out an a. Now if we multiplied that back in, you would have ax squared and then bx, and it still equals 0. Now we can move the c value over. So that's going to be negative c. Then we want to complete the square. So here's where we divide b over a times x by 2. So that becomes b over 2a. And then we want to square it. So we get b squared over 4a squared. And we want to add that to both sides. But we have to take into account the fact that there's this a here. So we can't just add b squared over 4a squared. We have to multiply by our a, so that becomes b squared over 4a. So now we want to factor our parentheses. So we end up with x plus b over 2a squared. And we have negative c plus b squared over 4a. Then we want to divide by a, because we want to isolate this x. So we're going to divide both sides by a. And so now we're going to end up with negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. So we're dividing both of these terms by a, or we're multiplying by 1 over a. But now we need to get common denominators and add our fractions over here. So we can multiply top and bottom by 4a, which gives us negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. And so that gives us negative 4ac plus b squared over 4a squared. If we reverse that, we get b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Now hopefully you're starting to see how the quadratic formula is taking shape here. Next, we want to take the square root of both sides. And this is where we get plus or minus. And so if you need a recap on that, I did make a video on why we need plus or minus when we're solving a quadratic. but that's going to give us x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And then now we can simplify this part. The square root of 4a squared is 2a. Then we can subtract our b over 2a. So we end up with x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And if we combine those into one single fraction, we get x equals negative b, or the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a, which is also known as the quadratic formula. So it's not magic, it's just math. But that's where the quadratic formula comes from. Someone a long time ago decided, I'm going to take standard form, I'm going to complete the square, isolate x, and create a nice little formula that future students can just plug in the coefficients of x squared, x, and the constant, and get all of their zeros. So hopefully you enjoyed that. If you did, please subscribe and look forward to more videos.